Hello everybody and welcome back. So for the final section here, we get personal and bring it back to us, right? Human beings. Not always in the happiest way though. So these images are from Pakistan. I believe this is a 2015 heat wave. Right, so here's Pakistan here, right? This is all desert, this is all extremely hot. Our equator, I'll maybe correct myself, but I want to say it would run something like here, right? So we are extremely close. This is a hot part of the world, among the hottest, and not only hot, but also extremely humid, which as we'll see, is a gigantic risk factor. Makes everything much worse, much harder for the body to tolerate. Just some images. So one is of folks having to process bodies and deaths as a result of these heat waves, which, as we'll see, can kill hundreds to thousands to even tens of thousands of people, depending. Folks who are outside getting sprayed with water, right, to try to cool down, and not just one or two, but a lot of them. Doing this for their lives, right, trying to struggle, survive. It's tough. Urban heat islands, right, and we will come back to this topic in a bit, right, but more broadly, urban heat islands are these things. So cities are hotter than rural areas. This is true basically around the world, especially as those cities are more developed, right? This has a difference of up to 3 C, right, which might be about 5 or 6 F. Sometimes that is true, like maybe on average this is true, but during heat waves and during extreme events, cities could be, well, as we'll see, all the way up to 10, 15, 20 F hotter than surroundings in some part of it. This is going to be a result of urbanization. As we've discussed, is one of the big trends affecting the entire world. One of the biggest driving factors in how our world is expected to change. More and more people all over the world are going from rural areas to cities, building up slums, building up and trying to make a better life for themselves, right? Ultimately, what is cause, right? What this comes down to is going to be energy use, right? So people in office buildings who are using energy, they've got air conditioners, we've got cars, all these other things, right? The amount of concrete and glass and asphalt, right? Which is really bad in terms of albedo, right? So you can imagine, you know, a big road with asphalt, right? Sunlight hits it. How much is it going to reflect back versus absorb? Well, the answer is it's going to absorb a lot of it, basically all of it. If you've ever felt like late in the day, afternoon, evening, like the heat that comes off of asphalt, it's real. It's a big difference. And then the final part of it, less important but still a factor, is aerodynamics, right? So cities are going to essentially block wind from doing what it needs to do, and so this urban heat island effect tends to be exaggerated, tends to be stronger in cities that are in valleys, which would include not just Phoenix, but also cities like LA, Mexico City. So this talks about some other causes, right? And big difference between places where you have city and everything is concrete as opposed to rural areas where most of the ground has higher reflection, higher albedo. And there's other factors in here as well. We're not going to worry about that one too much. Okay, this is a heat wave in Portland, Oregon. This is not the big heat wave from 2021, but one that happened, I believe this one is 2019. Temperatures here are in C, right? So we'll notice, right, which parts of the city are going to be the coolest, right? Forested areas covered with lots of green stuff, and people who know Portland will tell you, right, these are going to be the wealthier areas, right? The so-called West Hills, all the heights in here. Industrial areas, right, especially stuff by the river, going to be some of the hottest, right? Largely a result of what? Energy use, right? Concrete, glass, asphalt. All right. It's not good. Notice, right, the size of the difference between these. So this is 12C difference, right? So in F, this would be like 20 plus, right? It's a huge difference, right? And obviously, if you can live in one of these areas, you would much rather live here than in one of the red areas. Yeah. Heat waves, dangerous thing. If we had to estimate the number of people who probably lost their lives in something like this in Portland, it probably wasn't all that high in terms of a single event like this. However, as we'll see, heat waves can be profoundly damaging at a larger scale, like on the scale of entire continent. Talk about Pakistan, right? How, as hot as it is here in the valley, that the problem is actually even worse there, and the reason why was that you have humidity. It's, you know, it's a meme, right? Like, it's a dry heat, right? Okay, we're all tired of that, but it's true. Like, it's physically, really human, body and health-wise, really true. So what are we looking at here? This is a heat index, right? This is the feels like temperature, right? We've got the air temperature, right? And then we've got the humidity. And when you put those things together, right, you get how hot it actually feels, which is significant, right? Like its impact on human beings is not just about temperature, but about humidity as well, right? We've got our color scale, right? So, I mean, they say caution, right? But really, we're looking at stuff that is in the danger or extreme danger here, right? As far as what to worry about. And we notice, right? So if humidity is high, right? Let's say 70, 80%, which is extremely normal for the humidity to be year-round in a place like Portland, even more in some areas, right? If the humidity is at 80%, then how high does the temperature have to be before we have problems, right? Yeah, we notice the answer is like 88. In other words, 88 in Portland would be like 100 here, right? And in places where the humidity is even higher, right, which it can get all the way up to 100% in many regions, right? You start running into problems at temperatures as low as 86. I don't know. Maybe feel this in Cleveland, somewhere else, right? What does this mean? This means that in places where you have excessive humidity and heat, human body cannot deal with the temperatures. Why? Because when we sweat, right, that's how we cool off. And when you sweat in a place with lots of humidity, nothing is evaporating, right? It's not going to evaporate off your body and take the heat away as a result. It's not good. These are sometimes referred to as dry or wet bulb temperatures, right? So wet bulb means with humidity, dry means without, right? That's the big factor. As far as what human beings can endure, definitely can go a lot longer with high heat and low humidity. Who is the most vulnerable, broadly speaking, in heat waves? It's going to be children, elderly, disabled. Specifically, elderly are going to be the biggest as far as, you know, who is going to be affected over like a broad region, like an entire continent, right? Like all of Europe. You could have, in a particular year, right, excessive heat or heat waves could cause tens of thousands of deaths. However, sometimes these deaths are not obviously heat related. In other words, what starts to happen, and this happened with COVID and some other stuff as well, is even if you can't individually track every single person who dies from heat, there is this excess number of deaths compared to what is expected, greatly higher than what is expected. In other words, a lot of people who died maybe not necessarily singularly from the heat, but who wouldn't have died without it. It's this idea of excess mortality, which we have to discuss when it comes to this, when it comes to other disasters and changes in conditions. Heat and violence, right? So maybe we have felt this ourselves, right? When it's hot, people are, I don't know, short-fused, a little bit quicker to anger. There is empirical evidence to suggest that this is universal, right? That for whatever the deeper reason might be, when there's hotter temperatures, not just more sunlight, but hotter temperatures, people commit more violence, right? They commit more violent crime in general. It's not a happy topic, not something that we want to think about, especially living here in Phoenix or, you know, really anywhere. It's also a little bit of a tough topic because this is not something that can be proven with a single study or a single correlation. So it's a little bit emerging in this way. The exact nature of the relationship is not known, but there's really strong evidence that when heat goes up, violent crime goes up as well. Heat in the economy, right? So even if you are in air conditioning all day, there is still good evidence that you are less productive when it is hot outside. You would think that these things would be totally unrelated for people who work in air conditioning, and that's just not true, right? However, it's going to be greatly exacerbated for people who work outdoors, right? So construction, people who are agricultural areas, or people who live in areas with low access to air conditioning, or live in tents or outside, right? It reduces productivity, right? And it may not sound like much, but this can be something like 2 to 5 percentage points, right? But on the scale of an entire country or an entire industrial sector or an entire economy, this is like billions to tens of billions to even hundreds of billions of dollars that can be lost this way, right? As a result of heat. Not good. Heat makes air pollution worse, right? We talked about this a little bit with ozone, but there's some other reasons to get into. So first is, yeah, higher temperatures makes the reactions that make ozone go faster. You get more mutations, essentially. It also causes plants to become more productive and release more pollen, which makes allergies worse. That is a direct result of the heat. If folks living in the Phoenix area have noticed seasonal allergies getting worse from year to year, it's not made up. It really is a result of the excess heat and other factors. Plants are more productive when they have more of it. Yes, and as invasive species as well, right? Also causes drought, right, which can worsen air pollution because it leads to fire, right? And wildfire smoke is a huge cause of locally big air pollution, but also increasing for an entire region. Final part of it is talking about heat in Phoenix, right? This is a massive problem, especially for the unhoused, otherwise known as homeless population in Phoenix, which is substantial. We can just take a moment. I mean, you can see it for yourself to look at the number of heat deaths in Maricopa County. So here's 2009. I know the text is a bit small, right? This is going up exponentially, right? And on the one hand, yes, population has been increasing as well, right? It's a conflating factor here if we're just looking at the total number of deaths, but this is accelerating way faster than population is. In other words, the number of folks who are dying, most of whom are unhoused and live outdoors, are going up way faster than people are moving here. The problem is getting worse, and not just as a result of the city expanding. I've included some photos. Maybe we heard about photos of the zone or the dome, whatever you want to call it, right? Downtown area where this was especially bad and especially high incidence of these issues, right? The city has tried a number of solutions. It's putting millions of dollars towards the issue, though, as we can see, it hasn't managed to stop or slow or even really reverse the trend, right? So what is the city or the county actually doing, right? Part of it is air conditioner replacements, right? So they did about 500 of these last year is where I got this data, 2023. They find people who are, struggling, especially people who are elderly, disabled, or have children, right? But who live indoors, have a place that they're renting, right? If their air conditioner stops working, the city will basically replace it for free so that they don't die. Yeah, it's the only way that you can kind of say that. For most people who have some sort of housing, right, if they die of heat, it's usually because the air conditioner goes out. However, most of these heat deaths are going to happen outdoors, right? This is the figure that they spent. Maybe it sounds high to you. I wouldn't say that it sounds particularly high to me, but I could be wrong. We'll get into it. Daytime cooling shelters is part of this, right? So places where people can go during the day and cool down. And this is a map of all of the cooling places all over the Metroplex here, right? We can see there's a good number, a lot of them spread out, although not necessarily so much in this part. Well, I'm circling here because this is where I live and this is where the school is, right? Street outreach, so sending crews of people to just go onto the street and find issues and help people. Part of it is hotel vouchers, right? So they give somebody a coupon basically to stay at a hotel a night. The hotel is going to have air conditioning, or being able to offer transportation assistance publicly somehow, whether it's through the bus, whether it's through another sort of county service. I suppose we'll see how effective these are. And that does it as far as heat. So what are our big questions, right? Talk about heat, what it is, light, what light is, being able to tell the differences between these things, heat, temperature, energy, light, or other cases where we don't have to care about the differences. We need to know that different wavelengths of light behave differently, right? So low wavelength of light means it's vibrating faster, which means it has a higher energy level, right? Stuff with really high energy level could be X-rays, gamma rays, right? All the way down to the really slow vibrating light. So infrared, all the way on down to radio waves or microwaves, right? And our visible light spectrum that we can actually see with our eyes is going to be kind of in between those two. The air temperature on Earth, right? Where it comes from. So we talked about energy coming in from the sun to heat the atmosphere, but that there's also this one other major component called the greenhouse effect, which is a result of greenhouse gases, right? Where solar radiation comes in, right? Hits the Earth, it's absorbed, re-radiated outward, and then it hits those greenhouse gases and it's scattered in all directions, some of which comes back down to the Earth. Talked about the effects of excess heat, aka global warming and climate change, on the ecological world, in the oceans, right? All of those different examples of things that can happen, mechanisms, causes, impacts. And then the final part of it, right? The impact of excess heat on human beings, right? Talked about violence, productivity, we talked about heat waves and heat deaths, and then we talked about air pollution and the problems we have here in Phoenix. And that does it.